Welcome to my introduction of my Chessable course, Caro-Kann Carnage, the Tal variation that I created together with Ben Davar. You see here the Lichess screen, and I opened the openings book. And if I go to settings, you can see that I selected rapid and classical games only from 1600 to 2500. And they are the basis for prioritizing and selecting lines in my courses. So I try to keep my courses limited in size deliberately, so it's feasible to learn them in a short amount of time and then get playing. The Caro-Kann is characterized by the moves e4, c6, and we select to take the center. And now we play e5. Okay, and now you can see, if I go down to the most common played variations, it's bishop f5, taking the bishop out of the pawn chain, c5, that's the other main line, and combined 69% and 23%, they are 92% of the moves that are being played in this line. Of course, you can also play e6, but that would transpose into a French, where you lost the tempo by playing c6 and c5. So we will focus on the two main lines, bishop f5 and c5, covering 92% of the lines. So after bishop f5, we select the line h4, and h4 characterizes the Tal variation. And Tal introduced that move in his World Championship match against Botvinnik in 1961. So you can see it's only played in 9% of the games, and more popular are knight f3 and bishop d3. But at the higher level it's played more often. So h4 takes space on the king side, and it is asking a question to black: how are you going to continue? So you can see that the three most popular moves are e6, h6 and h5. So to cover the easy moves first, right? And it also highlights why we play the move h4. After e6, you can see that we immediately trap the bishop, right? The bishop can go here, but then the bishop is trapped after bishop g6 and the move h5. So the idea of our move h4 is to prevent black from playing the logical move e6. That's the move that black would like to play. And so in 13% of the cases we immediately win a piece. Let's go then to the next move, which is the move h6. So after h6 and also after the move h5, the h-pawn has moved, and the h-pawn was defending the square g6. So this has created a weakness on the h5 to e8 diagonal, and that plays a very central role in this whole variation. So after h6 we play again g4, and we see that in bishop h7 is played in 56% of the cases, and bishop e4 in 28% of the cases. Together that's 84%. Let's focus on this one, right? And now we're going to rip up the king's position, and you can see the hole on g6 that cannot be covered by the opponent. So after knight g6, king d7, knight f3, we have of course a beautiful attack on the king, and I will show you the evaluation. So we're just into the opening, and we are at +3. And we followed the most printable lines that black is playing at this level. Of course, I mean, bishop e4 doesn't really change the situation because we play f3. We don't have the square f3 available for our knight, but our plan to damage this pawn structure remains unchanged. And we are still much better because we have access to g6. So the point of this h4 and g4 idea is to prevent e6 and then weaken black over the light squares and create an attack. Of course, there's one line, so let's go back to the move h6, g4. So we covered bishop h7 and bishop e4. In both cases, you saw that we get this e6 in, and we are weakening the g6 square and taking advantage of that and have a great attack. A bit more difficult is bishop d7, but after knight c3, right, we're following the main line, e6, so now the bishop is locked in by the pawn chain. We just develop our pieces, right, and you can see here the main line, c3, black says I'm going to harass the knight, and now the threat of white is to play b4. So in order to prevent that, black plays b4 themselves, and now we have the novelty that Ben found a3, and after b4, queen c7, f4, we have a lot of space advantage. We're +1, and it's also a very nice position to play. So that covers the first two lines. So let's go back. We are here, right? And we are playing the move h4, 9%. You can see now we're going to the most frequently played move in 47% of the cases, h5. And we play the move bishop g5. So the move h4 was played in 9% of the cases and bishop g5 in 16% of the cases. So also this has a strong surprise value. And the most played line here is queen b6. And we want to trade the bishop. In 78% of the cases, black takes. We take back with the queen. And in 60% of the cases, the queen takes here. And we get again this push-in, e6. So we are sacrificing, you can see, the rook on a1. But you can see, in 92% of the cases, I mean, we have to play queen b3, and we have a double threat here. Our threat is to take on b7, and the other threat is to play knight f3, castle short, and then with knight c3 to trap the knight. So you can also see that after queen b7, we're not only attacking the rook, but the knight will be hanging, and we're threatening mate on c8 in 1. So it's a double attack, or you could say a threat of trapping the queen and have a devastating entry into the position of the opponent. So let's continue with the most played move here, b6. We continue with our line, and after castle and knight f6, now we play knight c3 in our line. We get this position, queen f1, king f1. And let me show you what the evaluation is. So we are currently at +4, and it will increase higher. So white is completely winning, but take one moment to look at the material balance. Right, black has 2 rooks for the queen. So from a material perspective, it looks still okay for black, but black is so far behind in development that white is clearly winning, and I have a special variation in the course to address how to win this position in general if you have a lead in development but you are behind in material or equal in material. So this is the most played move, you could say, after Right, let's go back. So bishop g5, 16%, h4, 9%, so surprise weapon. You can see here, queen b6, bishop d3. And now there are in 78% black takes here. And of course, black can just say, I know this variation, and 35% of the cases this will happen. And we continue with our development, and after c5, we play c4, and we develop our pieces, and we have a very interesting unbalanced position. And this is what I get most of the time in Title Tuesday. And I really enjoy playing this also on the white side. So that concludes, you could say, the bishop f5 variation. So we go back. Bishop f5 played in 69% of the cases. 13% of the cases the follow-up was e6. After f-right we play h4. Then we saw e6 winning a piece. h6 we play g4, followed by bishop d3 and e6 with an attack over the light squares with the queen entering on g6. And after h5, which is the main line, we continue with bishop g5, and in most of the cases we are getting a very spicy variation because black is going for material with queen b6. Queen b6 with the intent to play e6, and we are getting a very unbalanced, interesting position. So let's go back and look at the other main alternative. So after e5, 69% bishop f5, 23% c5. So after c5, right, you can see only, right, our choice is to take, and that's only played in 15% of the cases. So again, we have a kind of a surprise weapon, but this is the move that's most played at grandmaster level, and we have a clear plan. After d takes c5, we want to play a3 and b4, secure it, put the bishop on here. The queen sometimes goes through g4, we want to play knight f3, bishop d3, knight d2, and sometimes we have a push with c4. So we have a clear setup, again a very unbalanced, interesting position to play. And we can see here in 61% of the cases, black continues this, and only in 4% of the cases, right? So the move d takes c5 was 15%, so 4% of the cases a3 is being played. And after knight e5, we play our move b4, right? And let's continue, knight f6, right? And we attack the bishop, and then the knight has two squares to go to. On g6, it's not completely stable because we can kick it with h4. So let's take the main line, knight e6. And now we just develop our pieces further. And this is a very pleasant position to play from the white side with a beautiful bishop shining down. We have pressure on the d5 pawn. We have a pawn majority on the queen side. So a great position to play. Let's go back after e5. So we said 23% of the cases c5, we take. We looked at knight c6, 61% of the cases. So the other line is e6 in 31% of the cases, totally covering 92%. Again, we continue simple with our plan, a3. So, and we let black take, and we ask the bishop where the bishop wants to go. And after bishop b6, we play queen g4. And the idea, of course, of queen g4 is that the queen threatens to take on g7. That is the main threat. And we ask black, what are you going to do against that threat? So you can see most of the time g6 is being played. And now we continue our development with knight f3, knight e7, bishop e2, knight c6, bishop d3, knight f5, and knight d2. So again, we have a nice setup, and please recognize that this king is still in the center, has not castled yet. And would you be comfortable with castling here with all these pieces looking at it, and also with this bishop, right? It would be very nice if this bishop would be here, but the bishop is not defending the dark squares. So the dark squares have been weakened by g6, and the king is still in the middle, and if black castles, we can attack on the king side. So again, a very pleasant position. Let's continue and return to e6 and look at our move a3, so the bishop takes, right? And we play b4, right? The 62%, we saw bishop b6, and then we continued with queen g4, threatening the pawn on g7. So there's one more line, bishop e7. But you can see immediately that in this case, this knight has no natural development squares, right? So it's kind of has a problem to develop to a natural square, just like you have in the French. So this limits a bit black's setup. And we continue c4. You can see most of the time black takes. We don't take back. We ask, and then we first take here. And again, we have a very nice position, unbalanced, right? With again a weakening of the dark squares on the king side for black. We're going to castle, develop our pieces, put the rook on d1 and on c1. And we have a great unbalanced position to play from. So thank you very much. If I look to this course, it's only $7.99. It's highly rated, 4.95 out of 5 maximum by 28 users. There are 25 variations that you can learn in spaced repetition. Then on top of it includes model games, it includes tactics, and I wrote an introduction just explaining the plans and also explaining how to win positions where you are behind in material but have such a lead in development. I really enjoy playing this myself, and I had great success with it. And also, if you look to the lead chess statistics, it brings a wide many victories. Thank you.